This video is to talk about the very important topic of organizational change and what goes into it, what causes it, and how to do it successfully. Now, this is something that I've done many times in my career, either through my consulting work or actually working within an organization. And there's some helpful things I think you can do to make sure it's successful. It's very, very easy to fail at organizational change. And it comes from a lot of different reasons, but I think there's things you can do to kind of offset that risk of failure. So, and you might ask in the first place is what would cause a company to go through organizational change. Well, we've been talking about that all along. But if you really want to take kind of a look at the best way of thinking when we talk about organizational learning, or I should say the learning organization, I hope you watched that video on done by Peter Senge, who was kind of the foremost thinker in this area, strategist, and his book, The Fifth Discipline, was a very influential book and continues to be. It's fairly contemporary, and talks about how learning organizations anticipate the need for change and think about what effect it would have on different types of things that you can do. So I hope you paid attention to that. If you ever wanted to get an MBA, I guarantee you're going to get that in quite a bit of his teachings. So what is organizational change? It's basically a movement in an organization away from its present state towards some desired future state to increase the efficiency and effectiveness. Well, that's the textbook definition. It makes sense, right? But it's easier said than done. And for most organizations, it's kind of the last straw. So you try to do some things prior to that to help you, hopefully, literally, avoid making big changes. But at some point, you do have to make changes within your organization just because you can't possibly work around it or fix it anymore. And it's a tough undertaking. So here's what I equate it to. And I don't know if it's a good analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you live in a home and you've been looking at this bathroom in your home, you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, this thing really needs to get updated. It looks like it comes out of the 1970s. The colors, the tile, the fixtures, all this, everything looks old. And you say, I just really want to improve it. I need to make it better. So that starts with a realization that it's something that you really think you need to do. And then you go through the process of remodeling. Let's say you're doing it yourself and you say, okay, I'm going to remodel this. It's not without hardship. I'm going to create a plan to get through it. But it's going to look so cool on the other side of it because we're going to have all this new up-to-date stuff and it'll look really nice. And everybody in the house says, yeah, that's great. We'd love to have a new bathroom. Then you start doing it. You actually start the change and you go through the remodeling process. You start tearing things up and people say, I want to take a shower. It's like, can't do it. The tile's setting. When am I going to take a shower? It's all the pains of going through this inconvenience of going through this remodeling. And people say, it's like, why? At some point, if it lasts too long, people start to say things like, why are we doing this? Why did we decide to do this? Why did we take a perfectly good bathroom and make it a big mess like this? And then you come out on the other side on top and you look at it and it's like, oh, this is beautiful. Everything's shiny, new, up to date. It really looks fantastic and everything looks great. And I kind of forgot that I went through the remodeling process in the first place. Well, frankly, organizational change feels a lot like that. You recognize the need to change something, and you go through the process of changing, which can be very painful. And on the other end of it, you are poised and ready to take on your new challenges and enact your new strategies. So organizational change, while necessary, is also something companies typically do on the last resort, would be my way of putting it. So when we think about organizational change, we also think about and then we think about what are the steps of what organizational change is. And so when we think about organizational change, we also think about, where is it that we, what is the process that we need to go through? So again, we assess the need for a change. Again, read Peter Senge's work. the learning organization is constantly finding needs for change. Recognize that there's a problem, identify the source of the problem, decide on the changes to make. That's where you're defining the ideal future state of where you need to be. Really important step is to identify the obstacles to the change. You're going to implement the change, actually put in place. I strongly suggest a very, very tight-knit project plan with lots of feedback on how you're progressing against the project. Then using kind of control mechanisms, say, hey, this is working, this is where we're getting stuck, get past it, with the whole intention of it taking as little time as possible to do. And then once you get it in there, you have to decide whether you've actually achieved the results. Is your post-change performance better than your pre-change performance? And use benchmarking. In other words, benchmarking, think of those as control mechanisms to help you understand whether or not this really succeeded in what you wanted to do. So that, this is very methodical. It makes it sound like it's no big deal, but it requires a lot of management along the way. So here's some things I've learned over time. You need to, a lot of this has to do with getting the people who are part of the organization to go along with the change, all right? And that is no small thing to do. People are, I think, naturally resistant to change. I mean, if you don't have to change, you don't. We know that in our own behavior. So, but if we want them to change, then we have to model for them and actually make it very clear that these are the types of changes that need to take place. Now, I'm saying this is going to sound a little bit on the harsh side, but I've actually gotten in front of groups of people, of employees, and I've said to them, we're going to change the organization here, and here's where it needs to go. Here's why we need to do it. Now, I know for a fact, I'm looking out at the group, there's about a third of you who are going to say, it doesn't make any sense. We don't need to change. I don't know why this guy's up there. I don't know why they're paying this guy money to come in here and disrupt things. It's like, I think he's just going to go away. We're not going to change. Okay? There's a third of you that say, I think I'll sit back and wait to see how this goes. I'm not going to get behind it, but I'm going to kind of go as the wind goes. If it seems like we're heading in that direction, I'll get on board. And then there's a third group that are saying, it's about time. We needed to make these changes a long time ago. I knew we needed to do this. I'm so glad we're undertaking this. You in that last group, you're my new best friends. You're going to help me make this change happen. You in the first group that are going to resist the change, you're going to be doing something else in about 3 months. Because this change is going to happen. Okay? It's inevitable. And you in the middle, hopefully that swayed you to the right side of the fence on this thing. So, and so what we want to do is model what behaviors are critical to the change and make sure that we identify those, all right? So when we see people doing, let's say, for example, we need to improve customer service. And the way we're going to do that is provide more personalized customer service by going the extra mile for the customer, and we're going to put some things in place that allow us to do that. So I'm talking to all the customer service people, and I'm saying, okay, that's what I need for you to do. And then if I see somebody doing it, I want to make sure that it's an observable behavior. In other words, I know that they did it. Other people know that they did it. I can go and say to that person, I'm going to acknowledge that behavior individually and say, thank you, you're doing awesome. It's even better if you do that in front of everybody else. Okay? So, the person's doing a great job, and you can give very specific examples like, I saw what you did. You took care of the customer doing this. That's exactly what we need to do. That's exactly where we're going. And you did a fantastic job, and I thank you very much for that. It's good if other people see it. In a group format, let's say you get the customer service people together, we have a little status update on how things are progressing and changing. I'm going to say to that person, maybe even call them out in front of everybody and say that they nailed it. They did this very specific observable thing. This is what I saw them do. That's exactly where we need to go. And if I'm lucky, I've got a few other people I can do that same thing with. And the others see it. And remember that group in the middle I talked about? They start to get swayed over. Okay? And then always track progress towards it. Okay? Always track progress. Make sure that you celebrate the wins, so when things are actually going the way that you want them to go, make sure everybody knows about that. So this is one component of what you need to do to actually successfully institute change in an organization, but a really, really important one, because inevitably it involves people, and you want to make sure people are working towards a common goal, and you recognize them for their performance. If you have any questions about this, please let me know, and good luck with the rest of the chapter.